All right, guys. Thank you all for showing up. Welcome to Clearing the Air, the IHS webinar series. We will be giving away a $100 gift card for anyone that sticks to the end, so make sure you go ahead and do that. We are uh, here with Fletcher Williams. He will be presenting to us today. He is our indoor air quality expert. And along with that, he is also the IHS business development leader. So appreciate y'all coming out, and I will hand it away to Fletcher and let him present.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Congratulations on the $100 gift card. I did not know that was happening. So I love that for you guys. We'll try and keep things light, fast paced. I know you guys have a lot of things to do in a day, and I don't want to take too much of your time, especially with getting into the uh, different nitty gritty aspects of indoor air quality. But this is going to be an excellent overview of the things you need to know, especially with our customers on the West Coast. So, my name, as Tyler mentioned, is Fletcher Williams. I've been in the game of indoor air quality for about 4 years now. Kind of dove headfirst because the customers we service, Title One, Head Start, and Early Head Start, are the customers who need the best information and information that has been verified. And here at IHS, that is our goal, to give you all the proper information and be the resource you guys need in a world of studies, documents, and competitive products. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hop right in. We're going to be talking about a couple things today. So the first and foremost, the growing threat of wildfires, more specifically, how that is affecting the air that you guys breathe, you and your children every day. What's in wildfire smoke? This is going to be a little bit of a breakdown of understanding the contaminants within wildfire smoke that are going to affect you. And then the next topic is how they're going to affect you both short term and long term. The next aspect is going to be the importance of indoor air quality. And this is perfectly placed because it'll be in reference to the long term side effects we will have just spoken about. And then next, one of the more important aspects of this conversation is going to be ASHRAE recommended standards. These are the things that are coming down the pipeline from legislation that are saying these are the recommendations we have, which we believe here at IHS will become standards. Best solutions for indoor air quality, Serene Air and Halo, two products we are extremely happy to represent and honored to represent. And then a smoke readiness plan. This is something that will directly impact you guys as well as we move down the pipeline. So, the growing threat of wildfires. I know first and foremost, I don't have to educate anyone on this topic as it has been in our faces for quite a few years now. The first preemptive aspect of this was with SARS-CoV-2 during COVID. It really helped us understand that we have to be cognizant of what we're breathing every day and what is in our air. Then we got quite the visual display of how this can be affected when Canadian wildfires hit New York City. This is a direct picture from New York City, and it showed the smog, the combination of different things released during a wildfire into the air that can travel hundreds of miles, as demonstrated in this specific instance, and how much of a toll it actually took on the city and a direct impact. One of the difficult things about indoor air quality, let alone air quality itself, is there aren't too many visual cues. Something like a grimy surface or a dirty toy is easy to spot because of those visual cues. But this situation in New York City was a great example of air quality pollution with a visual cue. Now we're seeing the same thing in LA with harmful particulate matter, or PM, from this point forward, if you will, in the air as well. And that's coming directly from those wildfires. And I know many, many of you are getting outdoor advisories on those contaminants. So, what's in wildfire smoke? Now, I mentioned PM, particulate matter. What I want you to envision is a bunch of tiny particles floating around in the air at all times. We've all seen this when we're looking, say, sitting in our house and the sun is shining through a window just right, and we see all those little particulate floating around. That's a good example. However, everything I'm talking about today is much, much smaller than that. So 2.5, when we're talking about that bullet point line one, particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10, these are going to be microns. So this is just an example of the size of that particulate matter. Now, the particulate matter, PM, is getting released during wildfire smokes during that burning phase and released into the air. These PMs are attaching to larger molecules or particles and then float through the air for miles and miles and miles, days and days. And this is how we can have cities like New York City affected by a fire that's happening in Canada. Carbon monoxide is a big aspect that gets released as well. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, as I will refer to them moving forward, is another big thing here at IHS that we have started talking about because a lot of scientists have picked this up as a key point to start conversing about as well. Toxic metals, this is something that we talk about in our food, but we don't necessarily think about it in our air. Same reason that you might have some advisories not to drink the tap water. Well, unfortunately, we're looking at toxic metals released into those particulate matter and floating in the air as well. PM 2.5 can last for months on dust particles. As I mentioned before, a little bit ahead of the pace, but we are just talking about the things that need to be thought of when we think of air quality, right? There's a lot of things that combine together to create a problem. Unfortunately, there's not just one thing that affects the air. It's many, many different things. So we've talked about PM a little bit. We've talked about the things that get released during wildfire. I want to roll it back to VOCs. VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, sometimes it's a mouthful, are going to be gases that get released in different situations. A good example, I'll give two. Chlorine. Chlorine is a great example because it's a very pungent odor. That's going to be a VOC. It's a volatile organic compound that gets released in a gaseous state and everybody can smell it. This is a very noticeable one because of how potent it is. Now, we don't want to think about VOCs as little particles floating around in the air because it's not necessarily particulate matter. It's actually molecules and atoms. But it's something that we need to pay attention to when we talk about filters, and we'll get into that in a little bit. VOCs can also include smells that come from furniture, right? It's if you've ever gotten a new mattress and you can smell the sort of the weird odor that furniture gives off, or let's say you're outfitting a new classroom and all the wood or toys or things of that nature have different odors, that is going to be VOCs. And most of the time, we can only tell that there's an odor if or a VOC is being released if we can smell it. Not all VOCs have a noticeable odor. So once again, falling into that category of understanding there's a lot of things that can affect our air quality. They are just massively exacerbated by wildfires. So one note at the very bottom, HEPA filters don't capture toxic gases. So if we take VOCs and we think about it just being a gas, what is air? Air is just a gas as well. Air passes through a filter. So with the same logic, a VOC is going to pass through that filter as well. It's one of the things that has been recognized and started to be acknowledged as we move forward in testing and studies on indoor air quality. And unfortunately, we can capture quite a bit with something along the lines of an odor, but we don't necessarily capture that VOC. So I'll get a little bit into that here in a bit. So wildfire smoke and the immediate health effects on it. These are the things that are easy to acknowledge day to day and immediately attune back to wildfire smoke. Eyes, nose, and throat irritation. These are things that when breathing that soot, smoke, whatever it might be, we get that immediate irritation. Shortness of breath, coughing, and headaches. These are going to be a little bit longer exposure, right? But these tend to go away after a while if we don't remain in that state of irritation. One of the things we should be thinking about is long-term effects. Lung disease, cardiovascular issues. There are quite a lot of studies attributing overall mortality to poor indoor air quality. Now, I say indoor air quality specifically because one of the things I want to acknowledge is how much time everyone spends inside. And you might think, well, I do try and go outside, but in a smoke event, you're forced to stay inside even more. So most of our time as children and adults are spent inside. So we have to acknowledge the atmosphere we are consistently breathing, and that's indoor air quality. These health risks can be exacerbated by poor indoor air quality, and unfortunately, they can have extremely long-term effects such as asthma and moving down that pipeline, lung disease and cardiovascular disease. Something interesting about particulate matter 2.5 or PM 2.5 is they attach to tiny, tiny dust particles that get into your lower respiratory system. So we've all had a cough, but we know when we're really sick, we get that lower respiratory infection, and that is attributed to an infection that is attached to some particle floating around and has gotten into your lower respiratory system. So increased risk for vulnerable populations. This was a big topic during COVID, is that, hey, a lot of people who have first and secondary health risks are going to be exacerbated in terms of being affected by poor indoor air or COVID symptoms. Same thought process as before. Infants and young children have faster breathing rates. Infants and young children actually breathe twice as fast as a regular adult. So if you think you are breathing quickly, or if you're ever cognizant of maybe a smell that's coming in and you try and slow your breath rate, think about how much a child's lungs are pumping in and out every day, twice as fast as the average adult. They are very susceptible to diseases as they are in that growing phase, and they are just continually exposed to different harmful particles that can encourage the side effects such as asthma or breathing issues, things of that nature. So we want to keep that in mind when we're talking about indoor air quality and the need to acknowledge air quality in itself. So studies show negative effect on cognitive and immune functions. There's a point where, especially somebody who understands diseases, that we have to acknowledge a little bit of exposure throughout your life is a good thing. It's the basis of vaccines. However, as we move forward with whether it's the smog effects, wildfire events, things of this nature, those exposure rates are skyrocketed and therefore cause more harmful effects in a shorter time period and increase the number of individuals affected. Exposure to PM 2.5 is similar to smoking cigarettes. This is, as I mentioned before, those very, very small particulate matter that go into that lower respiratory system. So smoking cigarettes was an easy visual cue and odor cue to understand that this is harmful. But now those same particles are floating in the air, they just aren't as obvious. So wildfire infiltrates by a couple different things. As I mentioned, a lot of things affect your indoor air quality. There's a lot of different ways the indoor air quality exchanges, right? So we think about air as an example of air changes per hour. So if I was sitting in this room and I would want to think about all the different ways air can interact inside of this room. And that happens from multiple different ways, from windows, doors, cracks, gaps, things like that. This is why an old house with gaps in the doors or windows have a hard time staying cool during the summer, right? Air is just constantly moving and it's always trying to find the path of least resistance. So it's going to do that. A building's HVAC system. This is a really big part of the indoor air quality aspect, but it is hands down your most expensive system in your building. And it is not the solution most of the times. A real short aspect about HVAC systems is we might think, hey, I'm going to throw a larger, more dense air purifying filter on my HVAC intake, and that'll solve it. Couple problems with that. First and foremost is we're pumping air into a room that might already be tarnished or infected with different particulate. So we're not purifying the air that's present. We're just diluting current viruses and sickness. The other is your HVAC is not built to handle such an intense filter. So that's definitely something we want to think about because we do not want to slowly destroy our HVAC with it being the most expensive thing in our building. Outdoor air intakes, that's another aspect. When HVACs pull air into new buildings or old buildings, it's going to directly affect the air quality present. Opening doors, poorly sealed windows, all these things affect air changes per hour, but they don't solve the problem, especially if we have a confirmed, not confirmed, especially if we have a virus present and we might not even know it. And a little tidbit there, as I mentioned during our New York City discussion about wildfires, is particulate matter can travel hundreds and hundreds of miles. So, what is ASHRAE Standard 44? ASHRAE Standard 44 is very important because ASHRAE, the Association of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air, is a group that was cued by the government to start producing valuable resources for the government to understand how air quality works. And what they're really doing, and what we've seen them do over the past 4 years, is ask for the advice of ASHRAE, have them produce standards that they'd recommend. And now the government is calling upon legislators to make verbiage to help schools not only understand, but now eventually build guidelines to help them reduce the overall problems seen with indoor air quality. One of the headers within this ASHRAE Standard 44 that I took out and wanted to put here that is going to directly affect everyone is protecting building occupants from smoke during wildfire. That's the first aspect. That's what a lot of people are talking about during wildfires. But something very, very particular here that I want to acknowledge, and prescribed burn events. This is a great example that we have to think about the consistency of burn events and how they can affect our overall indoor air quality, right? We don't only want to think about the major wildfire events that are unplanned, but ASHRAE is saying, hey, even prescribed burn events have a negative effect on indoor air quality. So ASHRAE came down with Standard 44 and gave a bunch of recommendations in regard to things such as high efficiency air filters, HEPA filters. Now, if you're going to use an air filter, a high level MERV filter or a HEPA filter is going to be the only thing that makes a true difference in your center. Getting a high quantity of air through that HEPA filter is going to actually purify that particulate matter because ASHRAE understands we're going after PM 2.5 and very few things besides high level MERV filters and HEPA filters can catch something like as small as 2.5 microns. The next thing that we've seen that has actually been rather new in conversation is PM 2.5 sensors in occupied spaces. Now, when I say PM 2.5 sensors, I'm merely talking about sensors powerful enough to engage with 2.5 microns, right? So there are a lot of indoor air quality sensors, but a lot of them, unfortunately, don't have the power or don't have the capacity to read the things that can actually affect that lower respiratory system. So ASHRAE is saying we believe that it's very important to have continuous sensing and data pulled from each classroom, occupied facility, gyms, things of this nature to understand what's going on in that room, right? I know that we have an air quality index on a lot of weather stations now. Well, what we haven't done is acknowledge that that needs to happen in rooms where there's less air exchanges per hour. So moving forward, they recommend high quality sensors in every classroom and or occupied space. And then reducing exposure through indoor air management strategies. This is something new that they're rolling down the pipeline, as well as having strategies and different management plans for indoor air quality. Not something I ever thought I'd be here telling you guys, but having to have a wildfire event plan and things of this, much like we have. I'm based in the very bottom of Alabama, so we have hurricane readiness action plans. That makes sense because a hurricane can cause catastrophic events and we want to be prepared for it. But now ASHRAE is calling us to acknowledge that we need to have poor indoor air quality action plans as well, because it's just as harmful, but there's not as many visual cues. So, best solutions for clean indoor air quality. I talked about HEPA air purifiers a little bit and why they're so effective. The webbing particles, the webbing filters inside of the filter themselves are up to medical grade standard, and they are excellent, excellent filters. But one of the things they do not catch very well is VOCs, like I talked about earlier. Because if air, which is a gas, can pass through the HEPA filter, so can a VOC. So what do? They top it with a carbon filter. This is a filter just filled with a bunch of carbon, pretty self-explanatory, but it's going to help reduce VOCs, right? It's not going to catch 100% of them, but it is going to help reduce odors and volatile organic compounds. Indoor air monitoring, measuring air quality in real time so you guys know what's going on. This is a manufactured visual cue so you can understand what's actually happening in your facility at all times. And ceiling and ventilation improvement. Now, this is something, especially with our Head Start customers, that they have a hard time with, because a lot of our, especially Southern-based customers, were donated facilities or had facilities that were no longer in use and the city gave it to them. And it would be a massive undertaking to fill every nook and cranny to help those facilities. So, as it's a great option and something we do need to push forward with, we have to acknowledge that we need to focus on a multi-layered approach. So now, to acknowledge the salesman in me, I have to talk about two products. I'll keep it real short, but I do want to say with pride, we have the only two products in the United States right now that are ASHRAE 241 compliant. Fletcher, what does that mean? That means that before ASHRAE came out with 44, they first acknowledged what air purifiers actually make a difference, because there's so many on the market today. The government said, we need you to help us understand what is fake and just has a good marketing plan, and what is actually real and the science is proven behind it. And our two products are currently the only 241 compliant in ASHRAE's eyes. The first is going to be Serene Air. This is an incredible product that I could spend a whole nother webinar talking about, because the inside of the unit uses ozone gas. Ozone gas stays in that unit at all times, and they have invented a way to immediately convert it back into breathable air post oxidation. All this means is that it's not only going to filter, but it's also going to kill and oxidize all of the VOCs present. Revolutionary technology, truly amazing. And I know as we move forward, it will eventually make itself the standard for all indoor air quality products. We also carry the Halo. We've carried the Halo for about 4 years. It's a fantastic product. It uses the HEPA filtration, which is the top of the line when you're using a filter-based air purifier. And it also stacks on board the carbon filter to help catch those VOCs and eliminate odors. Both are going to be able to cancel out those, or catch, I should say, those PM 2.5, and both have the ability to integrate PM 2.5 sensors or indoor air quality sensors all together. Fantastic products, and we would love to talk to you more about them. This is another visual cue that I just want to let you guys know of a test we did in the Northeast, the ARC Learning Center. These are direct particle PM testings that we did prior to installing this one is actually with the Halo, prior to installing the Halo versus after installing the Halo. If you can see here, the numbers in the red, first of all, we have the location and room. These are a good example of the different early pre, right? So early pre-K is going to have a lot of children in there breathing heavily and releasing a lot of viruses and germs and bacteria. And the red is going to be the particulate matter that was detected in that room. And just to give you an example, under 10 million is a good healthy, what we consider somewhat of a healthy particulate matter density. Sitting at something like 26 million particulate matter in that room is going to encourage things like call outs. So it's going to affect your average daily attendance. It's going to be the reason everyone gets sick the first week back at school. It's going to be the reason you have kids who cough more, or an encouraging environment to grow asthma like symptoms, things of that nature that can directly affect the youth. But post Halo implementation, you can see those numbers are at a much, much more manageable degree. One of the quotes coming from the center director there is, "I didn't know that you could literally smell clean air. I love coming into my classroom and just breathe better." Fantastic. And it's something we love being able to talk with them about. So, key takeaways as we wrap up here: wildfire smoke is made up of many harmful pollutants. I'm sure you can imagine that, but we dove a little bit into the science of it. The long-term effects are much, much more impactful on your cognitive growth, the children you guys service, and your health as well than the short term. The ASHRAE standard 44 is moving forward and creating a standard that will eventually be held against to keep students and staff safe alike in indoor shared spaces. And indoor air can be clean and safe using the right products. A layered approach is always best, and something that has been proven, like either of our ASHRAE 241 compliant products, is going to make a real difference in your facility. So I know we had a little bit of Q&A. There's my contact information. One of the things here we realized a long time ago at IHS is we wanted to be a sales company, but when we really got to know and met our customer base, we wanted to be a resource and educational company. Never in my life did I think I'd become an expert in indoor air quality, but here I am because I want to be a resource for you guys. And if you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email. And if we hop on a 10-minute call just to make sure you guys are ready and compliant, we can do that, and we can move forward in resources and helping you guys any way that you can. So thank you very, very much. And I'll go ahead and end it there.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Fletcher. Thank you everyone for coming out. I believe we have a couple of questions coming in for you. So here is one from Jeremy, and he asks, how long does it take to clean the air in a typical classroom?
Absolutely. Great question. And I appreciate the question coming in. I'll kind of touch over that at a 10,000 foot aspect. So, when you're talking about cleaning the air in a typical classroom, you want to talk about air changes, right? So, we first and foremost, if you have a product, right? If you have a product like one of our two, you can completely cycle every bit of air in that room through that product in about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what setting you have it on. And that is going to be extremely beneficial because, as I mentioned before, we are actually purifying the air that's present. If we don't have one of those products to cycle every bit of air out of that room, you could be looking at hours upon hours, even days, depending on the activity in that room itself.
Awesome. See, we got one more question here, and it is, how do I choose a good sensor?
Good question, difficult question. It's kind of like saying what car is the best car, right? Now, there are standards, but unfortunately, they aren't standards that every company has to hold up to, like the car manufacturing industry. And this is where we want to be your resource. So, we've been talking with a couple companies that have done testing in real classrooms, not small boxes. This is a big thing when you talk about testing. So we've talked with those companies, and we're very happy to bring them on board and use them to help not only educate our customer base, but provide you guys with a quality product. So we'd love to not only boast of products that can detect PM 2.5, but have an array of other measuring metrics inside of it. And we'd love to talk to you about that moving forward.
All right. Awesome. Well, I think that is it for the questions. Thank you so much, Fletcher, for taking time out of your day. And thank you to everyone who came out. And thank you all for stopping in, being able to learn a little bit about indoor air quality from Fletcher. Like he had mentioned, if you have any questions, please reach out to him and he will either answer them himself, or if you're interested in any of the products he talked about, he will forward you to your local representative. So thank you all so much for everything and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you
Goodbye.
guys very much.